And it looks like we are live. And as you all know, give us a minute here. We got to get the Facebook groups joined in here. Let the entire Mile High Huddle community join together on what is a cold and balmy Friday evening. Mile High, hello, everybody in Broncos country. Welcome into another episode of the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. I am your host, Lance Sanderson, and joining me, as per usual, is my good friend and colleague. He is Mile High Huddle senior NFL draft analyst, the one and only Erick Trickel. And dude, this so first things first, this last week for the Sanderson clan has been rough. Personal family issues going on, but I get back from everything that happened this last weekend, and we got back to the house. And I sat down and I took my analyst hat off for the first time in 4 or 5 years, and I let myself be a fan. And to witness what the Broncos were able to do against the Kansas City Chiefs on Sunday was absolutely the shot of tonic that my family needed to have. Dude, how fun was it this last weekend watching the Broncos go out there and dominate the Kansas City Chiefs, regardless of whatever situation you want to call it? You win 24-9 on your home field and you run the football the way you did. That was a freaking domination, man. How you doing?
Doing good. I mean, it was great to see. I think everyone, even though I doubted it, and I'm not going to hide
Me
behind
too.
that.
Yep.
I doubted the Broncos being able to go and win the game this season against the Chiefs. They went and proved me wrong, and I'm happy for it. Like, nobody wanted to see that streak continue.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody did. No Bronco fan, anyways. Of course, Chiefs fans did. So I shouldn't say nobody. But it was great to see. There was multiple points, especially once we got to the second half, where I started to get a little bit worried. The offense started to flounder a little bit. And it's absolutely amazing to me, obviously, with the turnovers, I get why. But the fact that on all the scoring drives, the Broncos only had to move the ball 109 yards. 109 yards to score 4 times. Like, it's just something that you just don't see very often. And it was great to see. It was great to see the defense play the way they did. The offense do just enough. And just things fall apart for the Chiefs when things for the last few years especially, have always seemed to bounce the Chiefs' way. So it was great to see. It was nice to see that victory and break that streak.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, you get 5 turnovers. You get 2 Patrick Mahomes interceptions, one of them by your guy, Jaquan McMillan. You've been calling him the truth for a while. I came around after the Packers game. It really came around after this Kansas City Chiefs game. This kid's special, man. The play that he made on that, dropping down from his cover 2 zone and making that play in front of Travis Kelce was awesome. The scramble interception from Justin Simmons deep down the field late in that game, which really kind of was I think more or less the deciding play. I mean, Kansas City still had some life in them, but when Justin Simmons took that football, the Broncos went and scored right after that again. You get 2 strip sacks, you get another fumble from Travis Kelce as well. You get those balls to bounce your way. You get the key mistakes, and we have Scott behind us, behind the scenes running the 1s and 2s tonight. First time in a while. So thanks, Scott, for being here. We appreciate you, man. But like he said, you can't go 16 games in a row, no matter who you are, playing as well as the Kansas City Chiefs have played against the Denver Broncos and just continue to have that much success without having a bad game. The Broncos, I'm not going to say got lucky, but they got the fortunate breaks for the first time in 8 years, guys. 8 freaking years against the Kansas City Chiefs. It's been since 2015 since the Broncos were able to finally beat the Chiefs. And that is just it's such a breath of relief, a breath of fresh air from this team. And quite honestly, I think that shot in the arm might be the shot in the arm that's needed to turn the season around. We got David Cromwell jumping in here. David, good to see you back in the chat, man. We appreciate your support here as always. A good friend of ours behind the scenes here at Mile High Huddle saying, good evening, Lance and Erick. Would any of you be surprised or shocked if the Broncos end up with 6 or 7 wins? And Erick, this is the perfect question to start off our show because tonight, guys, obviously the Broncos have the bye week coming up this week. They're off. They have the Buffalo Bills next Monday night in Buffalo, and they're sitting at 3-5. Without beating the Chiefs, does 6 or 7 wins even seem plausible? And maybe now do you have a little bit more confidence moving forward and this team pushing a little bit closer towards a playoff run? Is that possible, Erick? What do you think?
Well, I mean, for me, it's not just the beating the Chiefs. It's how the defense has started to look. Vance Joseph has changed some stuff up with what they're doing defensively. He's calling coverages he's a little bit more familiar with, a little bit more Tampa 2 that he likes to run, and we're seeing the defense step up. Simple run fills, like just going really back to the basics, and we're seeing the defense improve. That to me is the bigger thing than the Chiefs one, because that's a big reason why they beat the Chiefs. So when I go and look at the remaining 9 games on the schedule, obviously the Bills going to Buffalo, with how bad Denver has been historically going to the East Coast, like that game still is bothersome. But you have a Vikings team that just lost their quarterback. You have a Browns team who their defense is great, but their offense just can't figure out anything. You have a Texans team with a young quarterback, the Chargers who are always so hit and miss with their defense, but their offense is good. A Lions team that has been kind of falling a little bit the last couple weeks, a completely unknown Patriots team, basically. Another Chargers game, and then the Raiders who just fired their head coach.
Yeah,
I think 6 to 7 wins is possible. I mean, there are still the remaining schedule is viewed far more favorably by me now than it was 3 weeks ago. There I could see easily, 3-4 more wins. I could see 5 or 6 more wins on the remaining schedule.
I can as well. And spoiler alert, I'm not going to give the entire reason why. I think that Buffalo is about to get stunned next Monday night. I really do. But you got the Vikings win. They're without Kirk Cousins. They just traded for Josh Dobbs a couple of days ago. The Patriots game, I think, is probably the most winnable game, if not the Raiders game week 17. That's 3 wins right there. You'll get the Texans as well. It's possible, 5 or 6 wins over the remaining 9 games is definitely more plausible than it, like Eric said, seemed 3 weeks ago. Especially when you look at this last 3-week run for the Broncos. Obviously, you get the Kansas City Chiefs twice. You hold Mahomes under 20 both times, under 10 for the first time in seemingly forever. This 26 straight games that the Chiefs have not scored an offensive touchdown. Like 26 straight games. The first time they didn't score an offensive touchdown was this last weekend. That's an amazing statistic. Straight up, an amazing statistic. And you've allowed 45 points. This is going directly straight back to the defense. Colby C. Collier jumping in here saying, I'm thinking 8 wins. I think that's about right. I think 7 to 8 wins is probably the most predictable outcome for this Broncos team. 8 wins, that's a dramatic improvement, quite honestly. You win 3 more games than last year. But going back to, like Eric said, the changes in the defense, and we'll start this conversation here on the defensive side of the ball. I wanted to start offensively, but let's start defensively. Like you said, Vance Joseph operating in the scheme that he is actually more comfortable in, the more Tampa 2, the cover 3 stuff that he really likes to run, moving the linebacker back down the middle of the field, single high safety look, man coverage on the outside. We're seeing a lot more of that over the last 3 weeks, and the results are very plain to see. I mean, you've only allowed 45 total points over the last 3 weeks, and your run defense has stepped up dramatically, man. This is probably one of the biggest changes that needed to happen several weeks ago. And now that we're seeing it actually come to fruition, I'm coming into the show very, very optimistic for the Broncos' future moving forward, even with Vance Joseph as a defensive coordinator, because he's doing such a better job of putting his players in positions to succeed rather than playing outside of himself as a defensive coordinator and outside of the players' strengths themselves. So, Eric, that's a great point. I want your reaction to that, though.
Yeah, I mean, as I was talking about, switching up the coverage scheme, that was a big thing. But we can't undersell what changes they have made to the defense either. Jaquan McMillan come in, and he's been absolutely balling for the Broncos defense.
Yes.
From his first start against the New York Jets, where he played extremely well, up until this latest game against the Chiefs. He played really well against the Chiefs both times, just absolutely killing it. Significant upgrade there from your nickel position. And then you also make a change of you finally benched Damari Mathis. Not for the guy any of us thought was going to be, the one stepping up, not for Riley Moss, but for Fabian Morrow, who is a guy who I completely, just kind of brushed aside of he's not going to bring a whole lot. I doubt he makes the roster for special teams ability. Then he gets to start against the Packers, and he does pretty well. And then he does well against the Chiefs as well. So they've made these changes with personnel. They made these changes to the scheme, and everything now is we're fine. This Chiefs game, we saw what this team was built up to be in the offseason. A team that's going to play tough defense, run the ball, and get explosive plays off of that.
Yeah.
This is what this Chiefs game was, what this offense or what this team was supposed to be.
Exactly. That's such a great point. And we'll grab this comment from Michael really fast. I got a question I want to ask you on the other side of this. But Michael jumping in here with great support as always. One of the biggest faces on the Mile High Huddle, Mount Rushmore of supporters here, the Super Chat Superstars. He comes in saying, "Good evening, Lance and Eric on Dove Valley Deep Divers. Go Broncos." Thank you, Michael, for that. We got Phil jumping in as well. "Good evening, Lance, Eric, and Deacon Scott. After last year and the way we started, I need to see a win over the Bills before I start to believe. Hashtag Buckham, hashtag MHH for life." And yeah, Phil, I do think that I kind of need to pump the brakes a little bit here because I came out of that Chiefs win. Like I said, I took my analyst hat off for the first time in 5 years and really allowed myself to be a fan. And again, there was a shot in the arm. It was the absolute boost that I needed to have, not only as a Broncos fan, but as just a person in general. You know, getting a big win like that, even though it doesn't have anything to do with my family or anything like that, but just getting that feeling back, that feeling of being alive again, was really something I desperately needed to have. So maybe I do need to pump the brakes here a little bit. And maybe 8 wins isn't the right outcome or the most plausible outcome, but I think it's definitely more possible than it was 3 weeks ago. We got David Papa Bear jumping in here. David McElrath, $5 super chat. Thank you, David, for joining us as always, saying good evening, Broncos country. Lance, Eric, Dylan, and Deacon Scott. Hashtag 11 and 6. Hashtag Buckham 3 times, MHH for life, Denver Broncos for life. Eric, it was a pleasure meeting you at the Mile High Huddle meet and greet. And David, yes, likewise from both of us here. It was absolutely awesome to be able to meet you, man. Eric, what do you got to say to that?
Man, it was great meeting you. It was great meeting everybody. We were glad you could make it. Hopefully you can make it next year, and we can sit there and chat a little bit more. I know we got to chat for a little bit, and then I got pulled away. But I enjoyed talking with you, David and Papa Bear. I mean, like, and it was funny too because we were talking. I can't remember what we were talking about, but Nick was standing there, and we were talking about something. And here I am, like a pretty big guy and everything, and then being able to talk with Papa Bear and have us next to Nick, and Nick like really make Nick feel small. You know, that's always a joy in my book, making Nick feel small. So,
well, you got to do something to deflate that ego. Yeah. You got to do anything you can to deflate the ego of Nick Kendall. And I tell you what, after seeing Michael Carmelini's list of the top 20 Broncos coverage follows on Twitter, Nick really sucked the oxygen out of the room the other day. It was pretty funny. But back to our conversation here, Eric. Talking specifically about one player here, and it's your guy, Jaquan McMillan. Ever since his first start against the Jets, like you said, he played a really good game that game, played really well against Kansas City in the first matchup, had a couple of he had a pass breakup and 2 tackles for loss out in the flats. The Green Bay Packers game, he was all over the field defensively. Again, against Kansas City this last week with the key interception, another huge, that series that he had after the Rashee Rice run, catch and run, where he burned Alex Singleton on the sideline, Jaquan McMillan made 3 spectacular plays to kill that drive and force a field goal. The reason I want to bring this up here is because since he's been like a full-time player for this defense, I personally think he's been the most consistent performer for this Broncos defense. And quite honestly, one of the defensive MVPs, if not the defensive MVP for this team thus far in the season. What do you think about that particular comment?
I mean, I agree. I mean, I do weekly grades. It's one of the things when I was with Pro Football Focus many, many years ago. That was one thing I liked doing. I kind of took that and made my own formula for it. So I do that every week. And then I do it for, at different points during the season. I do it after the first 4 games. And I just did it now after the first 8 games since we're on a bye week. And the highest graded player on the defense for the first 8 games was Jaquan McMillan. Good. I mean, he was the MVP against the Chiefs. And a big reason for that was what he did on that 3-play sequence that you mentioned after that Rashee Rice catch and run, where he got Singleton to pause and run down the sideline. I mean, I think it's the first time this season that I handed out a grade in the 80s. Like he was phenomenal in that game, and his interception, like he's just reading Mahomes the whole way. He baits a throw and he goes and jumps it and makes the play. Like he was outstanding. Like he's not having these issues that we saw with the Songbasi, especially with certain types of routes. He's playing the run very hard and physical. They're is a potential for issues with his play, because one of the things that he is very much one of those guys where he is going where the ball is. That is going to open him up for some double moves and jukes with play when the ball has when the player has the ball in their hand. And I thought against the Chiefs this last week, there was going to be a situation with that where he comes up and I believe he was meeting Patrick Mahomes. I thought Mahomes was going to, fake him out like he did last year against Damari Mathis, which we can talk about from the Thursday night game. There was a very similar play. But McMillan just stuck through it, and Patrick Mahomes didn't try to cut back and just kept a first down from being picked up. He's smart. He's physical. I loved him coming out of Coastal Carolina. He was a big guy that I liked as an undrafted rookie. He was one of the guys I was like, he's going to make the squad. He got that start to end last season against the Chargers. He played really good there, being thrown to the Wolves against a tough passing attack at the time with the receivers he had to go up against. Played outstanding in the preseason, and now we're seeing it on the field. Like, I've been a big fan of his for a long time since I scouted him, and it's just nice seeing it, materialize out there on the field.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's this next wave of the Denver Broncos able to find undrafted free agent gems on the defensive side of the football, following in the wake of Chris Harris Jr., guys like Shaquille Barrett. This kid's going to be good, and he needs to be a Bronco for a very long time. My guy, Colby C. Collier, jumping in here off topic, but love the t-shirt talking to me. Go YO. Absolutely. Powder River, let her buck. # beat the sheep. It's the border war tonight, boys. Let's go. Game kicked off about 15 minutes ago. Cannot wait to get done with the show. Love the show. Love doing the show. Love being here with you guys. But if there's one thing I can say, absolute fact, I bleeping hate Colorado State. Absolutely cannot stand them. And Wyoming, the Rams, the U's, they're about to run into a buzzsaw in Laramie. Wyoming's going to run for 200 yards against them. It's going to be ugly. Wyoming by 10 plus. Let's go. Michael Ronquillo jumping in here. Lance and Eric, who is your MVP on Broncos offense and defense in the first half of the NFL season? We kind of just answered this a little bit with Jaquan McMillan, but Eric, we got to talk about, I don't want to call it growth, but just the ability to bring his game to a new level, especially over the last 3 weeks or so with Zach Allen and what he is able to do, bringing interior pass rush pressure from the 4-eye technique. This dude has really, really stepped his game up. Going back to, again, with Jaquan McMillan, the New York Jets game. I thought he had a really good game that week. Had a really good game against the Chiefs in Kansas City. Was solid against the Packers. Had another huge game against the Chiefs this last week, man. At first, it looked like that might be a big bust for George Paton in the free agency, especially given the money that they handed out to him coming from the Arizona Cardinals last year. But Zach Allen's performing at a pretty damn high level here lately, man. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the first 4 weeks of the season for me, he graded out terribly every single week. Below 50, 50 is the average, 50 is the starting point. He graded out poorly, but since then he's just been getting better and better. And that's when that Jets game, like even then he improved from the week before. And that Jets game is when you started to see changes with the defense, changes with the run fills. Going back with the run fills of more of what he did, what Vance Joseph did in Arizona, which is more of what Zach Allen was doing in Arizona, and we're seeing it reflected on the field in his performance. He's completely flipped it around. I mean, and you're not wrong. It was one of those signings where it wasn't a bust, obviously, but it was like not trending in the right direction, just like McGlinchey and just like Powers there for a while.
Yep.
But you turn it around. That's why you don't, 4 games, you don't make an overreaction out based off of 4 games. Zach Allen wasn't a bust based off 4 games. It just wasn't going as you expected. Now we're seeing it. We're seeing the pass rush ability that he has. We're seeing him really step up as a run defender pretty consistently. And it's great to see because no one else on the Broncos defensive line, that's not including the edge rushers, on the defensive line, DJ Jones, Mike Purcell, Jonathan Harris, they're all playing terribly. They're not giving much help to Zach Allen, and he's basically a one-man show on that defensive line.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And I think another thing that really helps out, specifically the last couple of weeks here, is the addition of Baron Browning to the edge rotation. And obviously, the Broncos have been trying to get younger. They moved on from Randy Gregory, traded into the San Francisco 49ers for a sixth-round pick a couple of weeks ago. Following right behind that by cutting Frank Clark and releasing him from his duties. He just recently signed with the Seattle Seahawks again. So good luck to Frank Clark and happy journeys on your way there, sir. But getting Nick Bonito out there, getting Jonathan Cooper out there was definitely a huge deal. They wanted to see some Thomas Incoom action as well. But getting Baron Browning back, who has this kid, holy cow, he has been an unstoppable force as a pass rusher. The first game against the Green Bay Packers, he only saw, I think it was like 12 or 13 snaps or something like that on the defensive side of the football. Had 4 pressures. I know I didn't play a whole lot. Eric, correct me here because I know you're going to. My whole thing is he led the team in pressures and he only played a handful of snaps. I don't know the exact number of it, but regardless, this last week against the Chiefs, he also led the team in pressures as well and had a couple of sacks. Like this dude is coming out with his hair on fire as a huge addition for this defense, especially in the pass rush. They got 31 total pressures, I believe it was, against the Kansas City Chiefs, the most that they've had in over a year now. The most that the Chiefs has allowed since December of 2021, I think, against the Tennessee Titans. My stats might be wrong on that, but I feel that they're in the right direction anyways. So Eric, go ahead and slap me down, correct me on that. Doing this off the top of my head, but Baron Browning, the addition to that pass rush, man, cannot be understated how effective he's been over the first 2 games he's been back.
No, the only thing is he played a lot more against Green Bay than what a lot of people think. He played almost 50% of the snaps.
Okay, so
he played a lot in that game. And I find it funny that his first play out there was a penalty.
Yeah, it was offside.
It was just a situation, and you see it actually happen a lot. Player misses an extended amount of time, they get off injured reserve, especially on defense, edge rushers, defensive linemen specifically. And first play, encroachment, offsides, because they're so eager, they just tend to jump. But man, he absolutely killed it. He's 4th in total pressures already and only played in 2 games.
2 games, yep.
Like he brings a completely different element to the pass rush that the Broncos don't have. His technique isn't great, but he makes up for it because he's just kind of freaky with his movement a little bit. He just moves differently than what you normally see. He has enough power that he can go through you, he can go around you, and he uses that and he mixes that up and uses it and brings a lot of counters to his game. It has been great to watch. I'm super excited for what he can do going forward. And he's a guy who I've always been excited about. I was always a big fan of Baron Browning. The question has always been staying healthy, and it still is. It's 2 games. He's barely played in his 3-year career. So we got to see him out there, stay on the field consistently and able to stay out there on the field. To answer Phil's question here, thank you, Phil, for joining us. And
thanks, Phil.
As always, what's your highest grade on McGlinchey? 40. Is it 40? No, actually, McGlinchey, he's had multiple games where he was in the 50s, high 50s actually, and he had a great. And in the latest game against the Chiefs, he was actually almost in the 70s. Pass protection is always an issue, but it's not just one aspect that gets graded. It's every single play, no matter what. And McGlinchey has done well as a run blocker pretty consistently. He's definitely improved a little bit more and been a little bit more consistent. Was a little bit more consistent there against the Chiefs. He was pretty consistent there in the first 4 games. Started to fall off a little bit, after in weeks 5 through 7. But no, it's just one of those things of there's one aspect to his game that's absolutely killing his grades, but he's doing enough in the other aspect of it that just doesn't keep it from being completely atrocious. It was similar to Damari Mathis, except less so. And it's a situation with Nick Bonito as well. As good as he's done as a pass rusher, Nick Bonito has been terrible as a run blocker, as a run defender, and that has kept his grade being lower than what people would expect, because it's not just what he does as a pass rusher, it's what he does as a run defender as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And with McGlinchey, I think you're seeing a little bit, I don't want to call it a little bit more help to his way, but they're doing some things to kind of help him out, specifically in the screen game. And I know that this is going to piss Eric off because he hates screenplays, but the Broncos are the most efficient team in terms of running back screenplays in the NFL this season, specifically over the last 3 weeks. So this was from Nick Kosmider in an article that he wrote earlier today. Passer rating
over the last 3 weeks.
Yes.
The caveat over the last 3 weeks, that I can
I think
agree
so.
with. That
Yes,
that I can buy.
Yep, it was over the last 3 weeks. So they've gotten better. That the screenplay that they ran to Javonte Williams for the touchdown in the red zone last week was phenomenal. It was very well designed and very well executed. I think that this is starting to turn around a little bit for the Broncos, at least in that particular aspect. But McGlinchey, there's still he struggles with speed around the edge so much, and it seems like every single week he catches the worst matchup possible for him, because if he can get his hands on you, he can hold you. But if he doesn't get his hands on you, it's horrible. And he's just continuously beat around the edge by speed. And that's the biggest problem with this offensive line. I think this is a good segue here. We're about 25 minutes into this, and I want to get to your grading scale. This is something you've got a couple of questions about this. I want you to get an opportunity to kind of break down the process for everybody. So let's flip to the offensive side of the football here. We had another question coming in here from Chase Wellner, I believe is who it was, talking about right guard Quinn Miners. Eric, are you starting to warm up to Quinn Miners? And I want to add a caveat, not a caveat, but a more generalized talking point here. Specifically over the last 3 weeks, and I know that's cherry picking things here. The Denver Broncos are number 3 in the NFL running the football, 4.7 yards per carry. They are dominating up front. And a big part of the reason of that is Quinn Miners, Ben Powers, and Lloyd Cushenberry up front. The interior of this offensive line is really starting to come together. It's actually starting to take some shape, get some cohesion going forward. So, Eric, are you warming up to Quinn Miners, and how does his play affect the cohesiveness of the unit of this interior offensive line?
I've always been warm with Quinn Miners. Again, he was a guy I loved coming out. Somebody who knew his coach in Wisconsin Whitewater, and got to speak to him a little bit. But it's always been a thing of my personal opinion of players goes out the window when I start watching it. And from basically the second half of the Raiders game up through pretty much
entire Jets game. He was bad against
the week 5 game.
Jets game.
So up until through that game was really rough for Quinn Miners. And he had a bunch, don't get me wrong, he had a bunch of really tough matchups. I've seen a lot of people praising Lloyd Cushenberry, and we can come back to Lloyd Cushenberry here in a minute. Saw a lot of people praising him for who he was facing against. Guys like Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne and Christian Wilkins and all these tough defensive linemen that the Broncos had to play week after week after week after week. Lloyd Cushenberry wasn't the guy facing them. It was Quinn Miners and Ben Powers. And Quinn Miners was struggling against them. And he started to bounce back a little bit, start performing better. A lot of the issues that were with his technique and stuff, it looks like Zach Strief has really gotten around to correcting them. No more lunging, lowering his head into contact, especially when pulling and hitting the second level. No more getting off balance in his engagements. It's just been a lot cleaner, and his play has improved, and it's great to see because it's leading to more cohesion between the whole offensive line. There's less confusion as well, too. There were multiple run plays in the first few weeks where it seemed like Mike McGlinchey was running one blocking play, Quinn Miners was running another, and Lloyd Cushenberry was running a completely different one. So there just seemed to be this confusion there of what their blocking scheme was, and it created problems in the run game at times. So, yeah, I mean, he's starting to be better. I've always felt that he could be one of the better guards in the NFL, and we're starting to see him make that climb to be it. He's just got to be consistent with it, and that's a big thing with me is consistency. Can he play at this level consistently going forward?
If he can be one of the top probably 7 interior offensive linemen in the NFL. This dude is physical. He's athletic. He plays with power. He plays with a nasty, gritty, just I'm going to beat your ass mentality. And quite honestly, he was on full display against the Kansas City Chiefs this last week. To see what he did, there was a play, I believe it was a Javonte Williams run off a right guard. He paved the way open, ran down the field. He ended up falling on his face, but then come up, and Javonte Williams was stopped. It was a first down, but Javonte Williams was stopped, and Quinn Miners come running up behind him and absolutely just hammered everyone in front of him and got another 4 yards on that run.
He hammered awesome. Javonte Williams. He spread smack into Javonte Williams and pushed him forward for a few extra yards.
He did.
And then he gets up super excited, celebrating it. Meanwhile, Javonte Williams is like taking an extra second on the ground because he just got hit by a freight train. Hilarious play. Unfortunately, Javonte Williams is fine.
Yeah, but there was a couple of different plays like that where he's out there, like he'll open the hole, then climb to the second level, go dig out a linebacker, and put them on their backside, and was just super excited. I watched a cut up. It was Brandon Thorne, one of the top offensive line gurus out there in terms of scouting and breaking down tape and stuff like that. He had a breakdown of Quinn Miners. I watched it. I think it was today. I think he did it yesterday, but he did it. I watched it today. Quinn Miners was everywhere, man. That dude was awesome against the Kansas City Chiefs. Let's move one slot to his left, though, because this is the elephant in the room. Year 4 player out of LSU, Lloyd Cushenberry. And Eric, you and I have gone round and round on how bad Cushenberry has been, specifically in year 2 and year 3, where he was the worst center in the NFL for basically both of those seasons. He was replacement level player. This season, I think he's playing better. We qualified this last week. I think he is playing better. I don't think that it is worth a massive contract extension that he's wanting to get. But if they could get him on another year where like 1 year, $2 or $3 million, prove it again, and let's see you actually play with some consistency. But over this last 3 weeks, man, I know Pro Football Focus, the Broncos Pro Football Focus account has him with like 90 pass protection snaps, 0 pressures allowed, 0 sacks allowed. A big part of that is the offensive scheme and dictating what the line shifting and stuff like that, getting him into favorable matchups and not making him go one-on-one in situations against these crazy interior pass rushers that he's been playing against. But we got to address this, dude. What is your assessment of him, at least through the halfway point? Because like I said, I think that he's playing better, good enough that you can deal with it, but not good enough to bring him back on a massive extension like he's wanting to see.
So first, the whole Pro Football Focus thing with pass block snaps and pressures for centers, always throw it out the window. It's not just Denver, it's centers across the NFL. They very, very, very rarely are doing one-on-ones in pass protection. They get that help, which does help cut back the numbers. Now, I'd say if there is a center who is allowing a large amount of pressures consistently, then there is definitely a concern there that you got to go back to tape and watch. Watching the Broncos, they provide Lloyd Cushenberry with a lot of help. However, that is said, this was the first game against Kansas City Chiefs where I watched Lloyd Cushenberry, and I thought to myself, I would be fine if he is a long-term starter for this team. The Broncos,
really?
they still give him help, but they have cut back on how long they're giving him help, which is helping, the run game and pass protection. They're basically, all right, Powers, you're going to basically chuck your 3-tech, help Cushenberry get in better positioning, and then you're going to come off and you're going to grab this linebacker that looks like he's going to blitz. Or Quinn Miners is going to do that. Or you're going to sit there and you're going to check him, get him into Lloyd Cushenberry to proper position, and then climb to the second level and create and seal off that hole for the running back. They're cutting back on how much help they're on how long they're giving him help, and he's holding his own. And this was a tough game, and for him with the run defender he was facing, Derek Nottie does not get the recognition he deserves as a run defender for the Chiefs.
Facts.
And Lloyd Cushenberry consistently held his own. There were a few plays where he got stood up, and the run didn't do anything. But that's going to happen for any offensive lineman. They're going to have those losses, especially in the run game. But Lloyd Cushenberry won more frequently. He was consistent. He seemed to be more aware of what was going on around him, of stunts and twists, something that has been a huge issue with him going forward. When he's climbing, he always seems to there's always been an issue of him hitting his landmarks and missing his blocks. Those are even being cut down. He seems to have finally have the game simplified for him, moving slower for him, and it's helping him look better. Now, while I would be fine with him based off of one game, and I want to see it consistently before I really go in to Denver has to go and re-sign this guy. I want to see it consistently for the rest of the season. It'll still come down to how much are you paying him. And that to me is a concern, especially with the cap situation the Broncos are in. They can't afford to pay him like most solid average starting centers get paid in the NFL anymore, which is $7-8 million on an average per year basis. So obviously it's going to depend on how much it's going to cost and how much me personally, who has absolutely no association with the team and the decision making on this, how much I would be willing to pay him on average per year basis completely depends on what he does over the final 9 games.
Yeah, it is a what have you done for me lately league, and that's a big thing. We still need to see more consistency from Boyd, plain and simple. But like I said, and like Eric astutely just said, and I'm surprised that a little bit of what you said about this was the first game you just thought, like, you know what, like, let's keep him around for a little while. I think that you see some more consistency out of him over the next 6 to 8 weeks, and we can really have a better discussion of that moving forward. Phil, jumping back in here with some stars on Facebook saying, guys, what is the biggest difference between the Bills and Chiefs that we will have to deal with? Briefly on this, because next week, guys, obviously every Friday we do the big game breakdown. This week's more bye week. Let's talk about the team, assess the situation moving forward. But because Phil came in here through some big support around, we'll just briefly on this. Defensively, I think defensively is the big thing. The Chiefs' defense is sneaky good. They are a very, very good unit. This is not to say that the Bills don't have a good defense, but they are very vulnerable against the run. And if the Broncos are going to have the success that they did against the Kansas City Chiefs, where they were really focused on running the football, obviously 40 attempts is something that you don't see very often at the NFL level, except from teams like the Baltimore Ravens or the Tennessee Titans, where they have massive running attacks. Specifically to Denver here, if they can get that ground game going and keep it established like they did against the Kansas City Chiefs, they can. I think that's a big reason why they're going to stun the Bills, quite honestly. Eric, I know that's like brief, quick breakdown here. Give your 2 cents on this, and we'll jump into let's jump into your grades right after this.
Defensively, they're very much the same. Both defenses struggle against the run. The Chiefs were averaging over 100 yards per game prior to the Broncos game, as the Bills are. But they both do well in coverage. They make quarterbacks struggle and just play well in coverage, even with the losses that they have had. Bills do a little bit better getting pressure consistently than the Chiefs do. And they have more weapons on that defensive front that can get pressure on the quarterback. Offensively, their weapons are better. Obviously, outside, Travis Kelce, and Isaiah Pacheco, but they've got multiple receivers that can strain this defense. They've got a pretty solid tight end. Their running back situation is still messy. And then you have Josh Allen, who is so physical. And even though he's dealing with a shoulder injury, he's been dealing with it for a while. It hasn't changed how much his play style a whole lot. And they like to play big and physical. Whereas the Chiefs do that with their offensive line. Everywhere on the Bills, they like to play big and physical. So to me, that's a little bit different. It's a very, very different beast handling the Bills. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, early game on the East Coast, the Broncos don't do well.
This game's a Monday night game. It's not an early game on the East Coast. It's a Monday night game.
They struggle going to the East Coast no matter what.
Right.
They specifically struggle in the mornings, but no matter what, they have a not even close to 500 record.
Oh no,
traveling to the East Coast. So Monday night, Sunday night, Sunday morning, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Like they struggle going to the East Coast.
Right.
And sorry if I messed up with my wordings calling it a Sunday morning game. They just struggle with the East Coast. On top of that is there might be a little bit too much pressure being put on themselves. You've won back-to-back games, and you have a chance to continue making a statement against the Bills team that you might go out there and try a little bit hard, make that extra play and end up failing. So very curious about it. If the Broncos come out and win this game, I will come in on next week and say that the Broncos have a chance at the playoffs. Or 2 weeks from now, sorry. If they beat the Bills, I'll come on and say that they have a chance to make the playoffs.
No.
But I won't until then. I think playoffs are out of reach until they show me otherwise.
I'm a little bit more bullish on that on that possibility than you are right now. But like I said, guys, like I needed that win and I needed to feel human again. I needed to feel like a fan again, and I allowed myself to do that. Next week, when I do a lot more evaluation on the Bills coming into the show, might be a completely different tune coming out of me. But as of right now, I'm very optimistic for this Broncos team moving forward. Eric, we got about 20 minutes left. We tried to do this in a show earlier this year and haven't actually gotten an opportunity to do so. And Albert Knopper's in the house saying, "What's going on?" Albert, what's up, dude? It's good to see you again. Missed you at the meet and greet, by the way. Erick, your grades is a weekly staple at Mile High Huddle. They're usually up on Monday, if not Monday night, early Tuesday morning. You have them every single week consistently. Your top 5 players, your bottom 5 players, but we are at the bye week, and you have your article up at milehighhuddle.com. Make sure you guys go and check all of that out. And you've broken down a lot more. You've got players on the defensive line, pretty much breaking down damn near every single player, at least most of the starters and whatnot.
Every
And
player has played at least 150
it's very
snaps.
comprehensive. It's very detailed. Every player that's played 150 snaps is in this article. It's very comprehensive. It's very detailed. And you do give a little blurb on every single player for the most part throughout the entire article. But we've never really gotten the opportunity for you to explain the grading process and how this whole thing breaks down. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a minute here, and then we'll go through this article and kind of give some people more of the highlights. But tell everybody how your grading process actually works and what determines the factors of how you come to your final grades every single week.
So it's complicated, but it's not at the same time. Every player starts off at 50 points, basically. Just points is a lot easier. They start off at 50. 50 is average. It can go from 0 to 100. 50 is the middle. 50 is average. It's just the way that I found after, almost 10 years of doing player grades, making adjustments over every offseason and everything like that. 50 is just where I found that it is a good representation to start with the final results. Then I watched through every single play 11 times, watching every single player. And depending on what they do, depending on the impact of the play, depending on the technique, just everything, and making my best assessment as to what the play call is doing, what the blocking is, everything that I can, or everything that goes into it, they either gain or lose some points off of it. The impact of it can be severe. A missed tackle on a receiver who ends up scoring a touchdown is going to be a lot bigger than a missed tackle on a player who just picks up a few extra yards. Missed tackles get punished. Either way, you lose some points for it. But how severe is that missed tackle? How severe is a missed block? So the severity of it also is a factor into it and changes to the amount of points that you can lose. And basically, it's a plus or minus on every play of about -5 to +5. Some very extreme examples outside of that. I don't grade penalties. I do grade what can lead up to them. For example, like a defensive pass interference, the player won't get docked for committing the penalty, but if they get beat early and then they end up having to, go and grab the arm to keep them and get called for that, they will get graded for the point up into where they grab the arm. Same with the holding. If they're losing early, they'll get docked for that to the point where if they have to grab and pull them down, get called for a holding. Up until they grab and pull, they'll get graded for that. I don't grade special teams because honestly, I've tried multiple times, and it's not that special teams is overly complicated. It's just that, especially for the Broncos, a large part of special teams is, kickoff coverage and kickoff returns. And how often do we really have that, in Denver? Mm-hmm. So it's a lot that goes into it. I end up watching, I spend 2 to 3 hours going over every single play, every single week. I watch the game back over again fully, nonstop. Then I go over play by play, watching it 11 times over. And then I start, calculating the points and everything like that. I have a little program set up in my computer that does it. I just have to put in the numbers, and then I copy it over, and then I, use my notes that I take from the game and write up my blurbs.
It's such a fascinating process, and I love the amount of work and detail that you put into this. It's a weekly staple. I read every single one of them. They're always fantastic. And this week, again, guys, like I said, Broncos at the bye, player grades for the defense. We'll start on the defensive side of the football. You've got Zach Allen graded 60.7, DJ Jones graded 48.5, Jonathan Harris 44.2, and then Mike Purcell 41.6. And you kind of already alluded to it a little bit earlier in the show. Zach Allen, man, what specifically over the last 3 weeks has he done in terms of technical aspect and what he was what he was able to do, because in your blurb here, it says that he increased from 47.3 for the first 4 games to a 60.7. That is a massive jump. I mean, you're talking what, 23 or that's 17 points, excuse me, 17 points in your grade. That's a pretty significant jump in the way that your grading scale works out.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is he just found more consistency with his success. I wouldn't say that he changed anything from a technical standpoint. The biggest difference came from, just making the changes to what he was being asked to do with the defensive scheme. He was getting a little bit more favorable matchups, which of course helped. And on top of that, he was facing a little bit fewer double teams percentage wise than he was to start the season. With how they were doing it, Zach Allen was pretty consistently getting double teamed, which just makes life a lot more difficult for a defensive lineman. Their edge rushers started, them starting to come around. It helped take some pressure off of him, help open up things for it. Technically, he's not doing anything really different outside of what the scheme is asking him to do.
Right. And it just seems to be winning at a more consistent rate than he was earlier in the season. Jumping to the outside here, you've got Jonathan Cooper and Nick Bonito graded out because those are the only 2 players that have at least 150 snaps, at least at this point. Jonathan Cooper, go ahead.
Randy Gregory is over 150 snaps too, but he's not on the team anymore, so he got excluded.
Yeah, why? Exactly. I was going to say Randy Gregory's there, but it doesn't really matter. He's not here. You've got Jonathan Cooper graded 57.1. You've got Nick Bonito graded at a 50.5. In your blurb from Jonathan Cooper, he decreased just 0.6 points from the first 4 games, saying that he was doing well to start the season. It was somewhat reliable as a pass rusher, but doing a good job as a run defender. Over the past 4 games, he still played well, but not as good as he was to start the season. And for Bonito, saying consistency issues. The problem is consistency issues with Bonito to sustain his success, throughout games as a pass rusher. However, the biggest problem with his grades has always been his play against the run, which was terrible for the first 4 games. Now, Erick, I wish that I haven't seen the grades from the Kansas City game yet, and I'm curious as to what you have to say about Baron Browning here in this particular situation. But based on what you've seen with these edge rushers, Jonathan Cooper, Nick Bonito specifically over the first 4 weeks, are the Broncos in a good position moving forward, or do they need to go and find another player this next offseason to really accentuate what those 2 bring to this team?
They still need to find somebody else. I still don't think any single one of these guys is a true Batman pass rusher. I think they all are much better, being a complementary piece to somebody else, which is fine when you have 3 players that can be all complementary, and you have Zach Allen there as well, who's really stepping forward. They're winning their one-on-ones. They're able to get pressure. You still need to have that dominant force that can go out there and really take over games. And we just don't have that yet. I don't think Nick Bonito can do it. Well, he has shown improvements against the run. He's not a guy that you can really be super comfortable out there consistently against the run. Jonathan Cooper, he has hot and cold streaks as a pass rusher, which is common. And then Baron Browning, it's just a matter of health and being able to stay out there on the field.
Yeah.
So right now they still need somebody. Maybe Baron Browning can turn into a Batman over the rest of the season, but even then, you still have questions about his health going forward. How long, just because he's missed so much time. So it's just a matter of, I do still think they need somebody. I don't think it has to be right as things stand right now. I don't think it has to be a super high priority, but it just depends on how, again, the consistency over the rest of the season from these 3 guys.
Right. And I think the big thing with Nick Bonito, and you and I have talked about this behind the scenes multiple different times. We talked about, I think last week as well, and maybe the week before, talking about Nick Bonito. A lot of his success comes early in the game, and it comes when he's unblocked. Like, he's not a guy that's going out there and just winning reps. And I know that sounds crazy. You come off unblocked and you get a sack. That's a win for the defense, right? Yeah, no, it's not. Like, what are you doing in a one-on-one situation? Are you actually winning the rep? Are you winning, or are you just coming free and making a play that's presented to you? There's a massive difference there. I think that if we could start seeing Bonito win more later in the game, when actually going out there, dipping his shoulder, getting underneath an offensive tackle, maybe throw a spin move, speed to power, whatever it might be, actual go out there, dominate physically, and not just luck into being unblocked on a handoff or on a sack or whatever it might be. that's something I want to see moving forward. I agree with you. I think this edge room does need another piece, but the thing that I am seeing is I'm very much more comfortable with the depth of this unit, seeing Nick Bonito out there, seeing Jonathan Cooper out there. If they can get Baron Browning to be that Batman, maybe go and get another guy. I think it still needs to be a higher priority. That it may not be a first round pick, but if you have the opportunity to get a guy that you can go like Aliyah Latu from UCLA, if he falls to you in the first round, that's a player you need to go and get. That's a Batman.
Well,
at least the depth is at least. Go ahead.
When you start getting into if the board falls to you kind of conversations, and yeah, of course, like, I mean, just going, nuclear on that whole thing is like, if Caleb Williams falls to you and you're picking 15, you're taking Caleb Williams. Like, of course, even if you don't need that position.
No.
When I say higher priority, it means it's not somebody that you have to go out there and do whatever you can get to go get him super early in the draft.
Right.
You can let the board follow to you. You can wait until the second round, maybe even third round, and just go and try to see what happens. Similar to what the whole thing was with Nick Bonito. They were trying to move up. There was a couple edge rushers they were looking at. They didn't have to feel the need to actually move up. Got denied a couple times, and they ended up with Nick Bonito. And I will say that his game against Kansas City Chiefs was extremely good, and he was pretty consistent with getting pressures throughout. Prior to this game, or prior to the Packers game, I think it was, 4.5 of his 5.5 sacks all came within the first 20 minutes. And then on top of that, of his pressures, like 75% of his pressures came within the first 15 minutes in the first quarter. And then he would just disappear for the rest of it. But this was the first time that it was pretty consistent throughout the game that he's getting pressures and really looked like he could be, that reliable number 2 edge rusher for a team.
Right. And three of the first 4.5 sacks that he had came unblocked. Like that's definitely an issue to assess there as well. Moving back a level here, Josie Jewell, Alex Singleton, Jewell graded at 58.2, Singleton graded at 46.9. Singleton's one I want to ask you about here. He increased from 38.4 from the first 4 games. What was the biggest thing in terms of his jump in performance that made you grade him out closer towards the average, which, like you said, a score of 50 is average at the NFL level? What did he do specifically to make that jump?
Well, it's another situation where it wasn't exactly what he did specifically, but a couple other factors into it. Starting to change up what they were doing with the scheme wise, making it so that he's not having a lot of pressure put on him where he has to think a whole lot about what's happening, and getting Josie Jewell back. That communication there was so missed for most of week 3 and all of week 4. So Jewell came back week 5, and immediately you saw a pretty big jump in Singleton's grade. From week 4 to week 5, getting Jewell back.
Is that a part of communication in understanding what your assignment is more so than what anything that Singleton has actually done? Is that communication from Jewell for, being the green dot and just being more assignment sound?
Yeah. I mean, Jewell has always been praised for his ability to communicate and, get people into their position, and read plays and call it out, even after the snap. And that is definitely something that I'm seeing with Alex Singleton that's helping him. And again, the scheme change, I can't understate that difference enough of what they're doing and just making things easier on what they're seeing, not having super complicated situations where your linebackers are essentially trying to cover 2 gaps, especially a guy like Alex Singleton, where you can have him just read 1 gap and shoot it. So that's a pretty big difference for him. A lot less thinking, and I've said it before, if you want to have success against Alex Singleton, you just want to make him overthink things. You want to make him think a lot. And the Broncos have found ways to limit offense's ability to do that.
Right. Let's skip the secondary here. We gave a lot of love to Jaquan McMillan, excuse me, for what he was able to do. Quickly on Justin Simmons, I want your opinion here, because you said something in your article about him looking so much more comfortable in the scheme, and I agree with this in a big way. What was your assessment of Justin Simmons coming into the halfway point? We've got just a short amount of time though.
So also before that, I mean, he missed week 3 and 4, so that obviously hurt his grade overall for that. Then he came back, and it just seemed like that time off, the scheme changes again, improving communication, improving, the comfort level that he has inside what they're doing, and not as much confusion in the secondary. There was a lot of confusion, over weeks 3 and 4. when Vance Joseph was trying to like kind of merge what he does and what Vic Fangio does or Evero was doing last year. There was a lot of confusion in the secondary. And then we get that thrown out for week 5, and Justin Simmons has a very clear picture of what he's supposed to be doing, and that just helps him play better. And like with Jewel, getting Simmons back there on the field improved communication so much that's part of why you're seeing the defense start to turn things around.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that. And it's not to take away from the ability of Justin Simmons as a player himself, because he is one of the best safeties in the NFL, just plain and simple. Getting a player like that is always a huge thing, but I think that the thing that goes understated the most is just the ability to communicate your assignments and understand what this defense is supposed to look like. Vance Joseph putting players in the right positions overall has really transformed this defense into what apparently is like a top 10 unit over the last 3 weeks. So with that said, I'm curious to see how this moves forward. Obviously get a tough test against the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo next week. Eric, let's see here. We've got about 10 minutes. Do we want to go offensive side of the football, or we want to just wrap it up here?
Take some questions and stuff like that, because K-Hop came in and asking
a
very good question. For weeks, it was all about the trade deadline, and then Denver goes and beats Kansas City, which played a part in it. It really cemented that Denver could still be in a playoff run again. I won't, flat out say that that's the case unless they beat the Buffalo Bills. But Jerry Jeudy, popular name. Would you guys have taken that 3rd and 5th that was said to be offered by Adam Schefter's report yesterday? Would you have taken it?
With the value of a late 2nd to early 3rd, probably. But I have a little bit more understanding of what the situation was, talking with you, talking with some other people. The team that offered that, I don't know who it was. They were also asking the Broncos to send a late day 3 pick with that as well. So Jerry Jeudy in a 5th or a 6th for a 3rd and a 5th. So essentially saying Jerry Judy's a 3rd round pick and that's it. You're doing a pick swap on the backside of that. No. I think you hold on to him. I think you see what you can do with him in this offense moving forward, whether you're going to target him enough as much as you want to or not. I don't care. Hold on to him at least for the rest of the season. Continue to work with him. Continue to see and hopefully get him more incorporated into the offense moving forward. But you're losing so much value there with what Jerry Jeudy is. And I think a big part of this is this is year 4 for Jerry Jeudy. So we're going into that 5th-year option. So we need to see him go and actually determine if he can be the player that they need him to be as the 15th overall pick in the NFL draft. That's a long ways away to be determined yet. And I don't think that moving on for him for a 3rd round pick is really the best move moving forward. While you do need draft capital, I think Jerry Jeudy, at least at this point, I think beating the Chiefs kind of changed the direction of that. But as of right now, Jerry Jeudy is more of an asset to this team than a 3rd round pick is next year. That's my opinion on that.
Well, first of all, I think we can absolutely say right now that Jerry Jeudy was not worth that 15th overall pick. 100%.
Absolutely not. No.
Like we should not be talking. It shouldn't be year 4 for him, middle of year 4 for him, and us talking if he was still worth it or not. Definitely not. Mm-hmm. Dude has 5 100-yard receiving games in it and has 9 games where he has 20 or less receiving yards. His inconsistency has always been super problematic, as well as the issues on and off the field with his attitude, his work ethic, his drama, and all that. That said, I 100% would have taken a 3rd and a 5th. Now, there are other variables in that. Where was that team picking? Was it a late 3rd? Was it an early 3rd? Was it mid 3rd? Were they actually wanting a pick back? Were there conditions on any of those picks? Those are all 3 factors of it that make me sit there and wonder about it. Mm-hmm. But if it was just a 3rd and a 5th for Jerry Jeudy, I 100% take it, because not only are you moving on from him, and I still think it's a situation where Jerry Jeudy and the Broncos would both be better off parting ways. It helps alleviate some of the Broncos cap issues going into next year by getting his nearly like $12.5-13 million cap hit. $13
million, yep.
That's guaranteed. Like getting that off the cap and to another team. Yeah. We have another question here that goes with it. K-Hop. But what if Jerry Jeudy has an unbelievable second half? Would that raise it? Yes. And I think that's kind of what the Broncos are betting on. I would fully expect to hear trade rumors again circling come February and March of Jerry Jeudy, and that they're kind of held on a little bit, hoping that they can help build up his value and, end up getting more in return and still getting that cap relief and everything and getting that draft capital in the offseason. The issue is the risk that comes with it, because just as probable as it is that he can help his draft stock, it is just as probable that he destroys his draft stock. An injury, and he's got an injury history there.
Yeah,
an injury, you're not going to get a third and a fifth offer for him, like not at $13 million, and then you have the whole issue of that it now becomes injured. It becomes fully guaranteed because of injury. So it's there's
too many factors. Yeah, there's too many. Go ahead, finish your thought, and I'll jump in here.
And the risk of that is also why I would have accepted the third and the fifth now.
Right. If it was, let me restate my argument here. If it was guaranteed the third and the fifth, it was just the third and the fifth. Yes, I take that. I would take that. You're getting second round value. But throwing another pick that you already don't have back to that team. If that's the case, I don't know that to be a fact. I heard rumblings, talking with some other people as well. I heard rumblings that there was another pick that the Broncos were going to have to send with Jerry Jeudy. To me, that's too much. You can have Jeudy, but you're not taking any of the already depleted draft capital that I have. I'm trying to gain here, not lose. That said, there are too many other outside variables here that make me that lead me to believe that maybe I should have just actually done it. Like you said, the injury guarantee on the $13 million for the fifth-year option. That's absolutely a fact.
All right, and I misspoke on that. It's just guaranteed now. I forgot that they changed it on the fifth-year option where it only guaranteed for injury. It's now just a flat guarantee. So the injury aspect of it doesn't change the guarantees with it.
Well, and I love Scott jumping in. He's like, "Would you rather have $13 million or Jerry Jeudy?" It's an easy answer for me right now. And yes, that's an absolute fact. It is an absolute fact. But if he does go off and get you, 700-800 yards, 4 or 5 touchdowns over the second half of the season, that changes things. It does. Is it $13 million worth? Probably not. But we can at least start a negotiation and say, all right, well, we'll extend you, do whatever we got to do, figure out a trade partner, whatever you want it to have happen. Personally, I don't think Jerry Jeudy wants to be a Denver Broncos, so maybe we should have just taken the 3 and 5 and just been done with it. But regardless, I think that there's too many different factors, different scenarios going, and I think that this team is on the cusp of figuring it out. And Jerry Jeudy, if they do manage to figure it out, is going to be a key part for this offense moving forward. And Keith Brugman jumping in here with a really good question, because I have it's a counterfactual argument, but I think it's one that we need to kind of discuss here. He comes in and says, does the fact that Jerry Jeudy has worked for garbage offenses and one that might take off have a lot to do with his numbers and performance? This is where the counterfactual comes in. Because let's say that the Broncos did what a lot of people thought they should have done, especially given the way that it's played out in Minnesota, and taking Justin Jefferson over Jerry Jeudy. And Jerry Jeudy ends up being in Minnesota with Kirk Cousins in a more stable offensive environment, more stable quarterback situation. Does Jerry Jeudy turn into the best wide receiver in the NFL right now? He has all the same physical abilities. They're great talent. I mean, nickel cent head, but at the same time, he's got the ability to separate, get himself open, catch the football, turn and run with it. Justin Jefferson seemingly is schemed open every single time that he touches the football. There is not a player within 10 yards of him. Put him in the Denver Broncos offense with Brandon Allen and so Brandon Allen, Case Keenum, Joe Flacco, Drew Lock, the myriad of quarterbacks that the Broncos have had over the last 5 seasons. Put Justin Jefferson into this offense. Is it the same thing that we're seeing with Jerry Jeudy right now? Are we still having the same conversation? I think that with the wide receiver position being so dependent on everything around you, the offensive line, the quarterback play calling, the running game, accentuating the passing game, I think that that's a conversation worth having. But also at the same time, it doesn't matter. You can't prove the counterfactual. So Eric, the long way of saying I don't think it matters, but what do you think about that particular question and what Keith brought in here? The offensive surroundings of Jerry Jeudy, is that one of the bigger problems with it, or is it just he's just not good at football?
Good receivers find ways to produce. Terry McLaurin has dealt with multiple terrible quarterbacks, and he has 4,000-yard receiving seasons in his career already. Who was the New York Jets last year, they had all those issues, and Garrett Wilson put up 1,000 yards, and so on and so forth. Like, you see good receivers still produce because they're still winning. And so it's a situation of like, yes, the quarterbacks and the offense situations do matter. It does have an impact on it, but it's also a thing of good receivers still produce. And not to take away from Jerry Jeudy, he almost broke that 1,000-yard mark last year. So that is a sign that of like, it really still can still see him produce even when the quarterback situation is great, because we all know how Russell Wilson was last year, and he still put up almost 1,000 yards. So I don't think that you can give him a super big pass for the production issues that he's had and the consistency issues that he's had because of the quarterback situation or the offense. Because we see it with other teams and with what we can go off of last year with what he managed to do.
Right.
Like, I just don't think it's a huge pass for him.
Like I said, it's impossible to prove a counterfactual, because I think that I do think that if you put Jerry Jeudy in a better situation, there's something that you and I talked about in that specific draft class. Actually, it was the argument, because I had Jerry Jeudy as the number one wide receiver in that class, and I know for a fact that you had CeeDee Lamb as the number one wide receiver in that 2020 NFL draft class. The argument that you had was that CeeDee Lamb was quarterback transcendent. It did not matter who was throwing him the football. He was always going to be able to produce. Justin Jefferson was a player that was quarterback transcendent. They're two completely different things. I think Jeudy is scheme dependent and quarterback dependent. He needs to have the right scheme and the right quarterback. He would look really good in Miami, quite honestly. I think a lot of players look good in Miami. But I think if you put Jerry Jeudy in the situation in Minnesota, where he has an accurate quarterback, throws on time, schemed open a lot in Minnesota, and you put Justin Jefferson here, Jefferson wouldn't be the great receiver that he is right now, just because the offensive struggles have dictated that. But he would be a lot better than Jerry Jeudy is in Denver right now, and I don't think that that's really up for debate. I mean, you could try to, but again, you can't prove the counterfactual. Regardless, great conversation. Go ahead.
The biggest issue with Jerry Jeudy is always his effort, and it has always been his effort. And that is something that doesn't matter the scheme, it doesn't matter the quarterback. He's had effort questions going back to Alabama. Effort is a big question, and I know that one team that was looking for wide receiver help, they crossed Jeudy off their list because of 3 plays against the Chiefs, because Judy's effort was just so terrible. 3 plays. That was it for them to be like, yeah, nah, we'll look elsewhere. Didn't end up getting receiver help, but they weren't even willing to look at Jerry Jeudy prior to the trade deadline because of those 3 plays.
I was about to say, was that Detroit? Was that Detroit that did that? Because then they went and got Donovan Peoples-Jones. Let's see here. There was one other one that I wanted to grab, and I can't find it.
Well, we're getting late on time.
Let's wrap it up here. Yeah. Let's wrap it up here. And sorry for cutting you off as many times as I have tonight.
That's all good, man.
Starting to get groggy, starting to not feel very good. I'm sure you guys.
You're old and it's getting late.
All right, gray hair. Easy there, kid. Let's go. Anyways, guys, thank you all for joining us here. Great conversation. A lot of outside the box thinking, as we always like to do on a Friday evening for the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. You guys can follow us on Twitter by finding me at @LanceS_MHH, and for Erick at Erick Trickel. Also for Scott behind the scenes running the 1s and 2s at Scout Kennedy. While you guys are at it on the Twit machine, make sure you guys are following at Mile High Huddle. That's some other account where you guys get breaking news and analysis regarding your Denver Broncos, film breakdowns, opinion articles, anything there. You're going to find it at Mile High Huddle and also at milehighhuddle.com. Guys, hit the merch tent on the way out, mhhmerch.com. Get yourself a hat. There's a t-shirt, a coffee cup, face mask, anything to suit your fancy. You guys will find it there. Something for the guys, for the gals, a onesie for your baby if you want or are so inclined to do so. And guys, if you're not financially able to do so in this rough environment, we get it. You know, super chats, stars, donations, they help out a ton. The merch tent, everything like that. It's a great way to support. But regardless of what you guys are doing, you should be subscribing, liking, and sharing. Subscribe to Mile High Huddle across all platforms: YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, Apple Podcasts. Leave a 5-star review, guys. Like every video and article you guys see across those social media platforms. And if you love it, please, this is the greatest way to help grow the community, because without your guys' support, we couldn't do what we do best, which is cover the Denver Broncos. Share it to all your Broncos fans, because that, again, huge, tremendous amount of support. I've got Wyoming Cowboys football to go watch. That's going to be my last words. Eric, anything from you?
Yeah, I gotta go to the store and start getting Christmas stuff. Halloween's done. No one cares about Thanksgiving, so Christmas stuff it is.
Don't you dare. Don't you dare slander my favorite holiday like that. Anyways, guys, you all stay safe and take care. Have a great rest of your weekend. Like I said, Powder River, let her buck. Let's go, Pokes. And as always, go Broncos. We'll see you guys same time, same place next week.